Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. Emily Daniels, a mother living in a small town in California, has gone through dark days when her daughter Lily went missing after attending a class at a local art center the family had long trusted. All hope of finding her daughter has been extinguished, although Emily has not given up. The pain and anxiety about her daughter's safety never leaves her. Every day is a miserable day, as the nightmare of losing her child continues to haunt her, and despair takes over her heart. 2 years have passed since Lily disappeared, but for Emily, time seems to have stopped. She has not had any new news about her daughter. The anxiety and pressure continue to weigh on her. She feels like she is living in a world without joy, without peace. Every day she continues to search, continues to hope, but each time she finds nothing, the feeling of disappointment deepens. One afternoon, as Emily sat at home working, a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. She decided to check the security camera videos she had installed near the art center where Lily studied. Emily didn't think much of it as she started to review each old video, but then a scene made her heart stop, a scene she never thought she would see. In the video, a man in a dark coat and hat was leading a little girl who looked like Lily through an area near an empty lot at night. The girl in the video had a small figure, light brown hair and old clothes that Lily often wore. And in that moment, all of Emily's feelings seemed to sink. The girl in the video was her daughter, Lily. This feeling was both strange and familiar, like a spark of hope that had just ignited but was immediately extinguished by anxiety. Emily she quickly went back to the older videos to see if there was any clue that would allow her to confirm this information. With each passing second, her heart pounded harder and her anxiety grew. This was the only clue she had after 2 long years of searching. But was it a sign of the truth or just a terrifying coincidence? She immediately called her husband, Jack. When Jack picked up, Emily's voice was strained, almost breathless. "Funny, I just realized something. I saw Lily on the camera. I saw her. It must be Lily," she said in a gasp. Jack sounded worried but couldn't help but ask, "What? Are you sure?" Emily tried to calm herself but couldn't shake the feeling of dizziness rising in her chest. "It must be Lily. I saw a man leading her across the clearing. He was wearing a dark coat and a hat. It was like an old memory and I couldn't be wrong." Jack, even from a distance, could sense the worry in his wife's voice. "We'll check everything together," he said. "Don't trust your feelings. Wait until I come back and we'll investigate together." Emily nodded, although she knew in her heart that they couldn't delay any longer. Every passing moment could be the only chance to find Lily. She couldn't let this disappearance continue to paralyze her family's life. In the following days, when Jack returned home, the two of them reviewed the videos together and analyzed all the clues they had. Emily was determined not to give up. She continued to follow the steps of the man in the video, check the nearby areas, and find suspicious points in conversations with the people involved. Feelings of hope and anxiety intertwined. Each step brought them closer to the truth, but also made them feel extremely pressured. Would they find Lily or would they fail again like all the times before? The question lingered in their minds as each step opened a new door of hope, but also of fear. Emily knew that, no matter the outcome, she had to continue. There was no choice but to hope and act. Emily sat in front of her computer screen, her hands shaking as she continued to examine the video she had just discovered. Although her heart was filled with worry and doubt, a part of her couldn't help but hope. Was this a sign of something real? Could she find her daughter after 2 long years of suffering? She couldn't let this feeling fade away, and it seemed that time had suddenly become too short to do anything. Unable to wait any longer, Emily decided to search for more clues. She began to search for information about the man in the video. Looking closely at the image, Emily noticed an important detail. The dark jacket the man was wearing showed signs of being used for a long time, but was very well preserved. Emily did not recognize this man immediately, but the way he moved and led the girl through the deserted area made her feel uneasy. Although she could not see his face clearly, Emily had a strong feeling that he was not an ordinary person. Emily began to surf the web, looking for information that could be related to this man. Under the pressure of suspicion and the desire to find Lily, she opened Google and typed in keywords such as art center in California, man leading children, charity activities supporting children. The text on the screen gradually formed a vague picture of a charity called the Green Hills Charity, an organization that provided support to orphans and families in need. This made Emily hesitate a little. The organization sounded reasonable, but the more she looked into it, the more it felt wrong. With a nagging feeling in her heart, Emily continued to browse through the documents related to the charity. She discovered that the man in the video was affiliated with the Green Hills Charity as a volunteer. His name did not appear on the official documents, but Emily found an old post from a fundraising event the organization held 3 years ago. In the post, a man in a dark jacket was standing next to a group of orphans receiving support from the organization. When Emily looked closer at the photo in the post, she realized that the image of the man in the video was the person in the photo. More than just a volunteer, he was in photos taken at charity events, but he didn't appear in any official reports of staff or recognized volunteers. This worried Emily even more. She began to suspect that this man might not just be a volunteer, but someone with a secret relationship with some of the missing children. Emily's suspicions grew stronger and stronger. She couldn't just sit back and wait for help from the police or the charity. She began to focus on a connection she had never considered before: missing children. Emily scanned through police reports and articles about missing children in the area. Lily's name didn't appear, but something strange happened. On the list of missing children, she saw names that matched the ones mentioned in the reports of the Green Hills Charity. The names all had similar backgrounds: abandoned children, living in poor areas, and never found after being taken in by this organization. Emily's suspicions became clearer. It seemed that the missing children were not a coincidence. They all had something in common. They had been in contact with the Green Hills Charity. Her emotions at this moment were no longer anxiety or confusion, but a huge wave of burning hope. This could be the key to finding the truth about Lily, and she could not delay any longer. Emily decided to contact an old friend who was a police officer in California, whom she had known since the early days of Lily's disappearance. She told him everything she had discovered and asked for his help. The feeling of anxiety still lingered, but Emily knew she had found an important clue. She had no choice but to continue to explore the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. A new ray of hope had just dawned, and Emily felt a surge of strength within her. She couldn't turn back. She had to go all the way. Every moment was precious, and would bring her closer to the daughter she had lost for so long. She stood up, determined to continue her journey to find Lily, with hope and anxiety intertwined in her heart. Emily felt like she was walking down a vague path, where every step touched a bend, where every doubt opened up more unanswered questions. With the new information she discovered, she decided to head to New York, where the Green Hills Charity was headquartered. This was her only chance to find her daughter, even though she knew that the journey would be tiring and challenging. As she entered the organization's office, a sense of tension began to rise within her. The large room was lined with neatly arranged desks and chairs, and neatly arranged files. Emily felt an eerie silence, without the noise of the staff working, only the ticking of the clock and the dim lights shining from the ceiling. She met Thomas Gray, the man she had heard about during the investigations. Thomas was a longtime employee at the Green Hills Charity, who was responsible for managing a child rescue center in New York. He seemed very kind, with a gentle face and a calm, sometimes sincere look in his eyes, as if he was someone who was always willing to help others. Emily couldn't help but feel a little reassured by looking into those eyes, but a part of her was uneasy, as if something was wrong. From the moment Thomas sat her down and started talking about the charity, Emily had noticed something strange. He was so confident, as if everything he said was true and beyond doubt. She sat quietly listening, but her mind was busy trying to make connections between Thomas and the information she had just discovered. During the conversation, Thomas shared that he was very dedicated to helping orphans and had worked with many organizations before joining the Green Hills Charity. He kept emphasizing the importance of his work and his passion for helping children. However, at this moment, a question suddenly popped into Emily's mind. Is he really who he says he is? As they went through the old records of the center, Emily began to feel nervous. The orphans' files were full and detailed, but they were missing some important information that she thought was necessary. She began to look through old photos from the events. The children in them all looked peaceful and happy. But in one photo, she suddenly saw a familiar face. Her heart stopped when she recognized the person in the photo. It was Lily, her daughter, standing next to a group of other children, wearing the pink jacket she had bought her for her 9th birthday. The feeling of shock and dizziness made Emily unable to breathe. She quickly examined the photo again, and the longer she looked, the more anxious she felt. "Thomas, why is there a photo of Lily here?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Thomas turned to look at her, his eyes slightly surprised but quickly returned to calm. "Oh, it's an old photo from one of our events. Maybe this is one of the children who was admitted to the center in the past. You can see that this is a photo from a few years ago." Although Thomas's answer was reasonable, Emily couldn't help but feel that something was fishy. She looked at his face, trying to find some sign that he was hiding something. But nothing was obvious. Thomas didn't seem to be worried at all, simply continuing his work as usual. Emily decided not to let her doubts get the better of her. She needed to be patient and continue investigating. However, the feeling of anxiety still lingered. Throughout the conversation, an uneasy feeling grew in her heart. She wondered if this was the real connection she was looking for. The old photos, the profiles Thomas provided her, everything was too perfect. But there was something in her heart that she couldn't explain. Why did a charity have Lily's photo? Why did this man seem to open the door to his world so easily? Determined not to give up, Emily decided to find out more. She needed to know everything about this organization and whether Thomas had anything to do with Lily's disappearance. The truth was hidden in the documents, in the photos, and in the small details that people easily overlooked. Emily knew that she couldn't back down, couldn't let this feeling of doubt control her. She needed to keep searching, find the truth, and bring Lily home. Emily became more and more obsessed with the small details she discovered during her investigation. Each new piece of the puzzle was like a sign that led her closer to the truth about Lily's disappearance. A casual detail that Thomas had casually mentioned in a recent conversation suddenly made Emily's heart pound. The address Thomas had mentioned, an obscure lot near a large park in upstate New York, made her feel nothing but suspicion. Why would he mention such an obscure address? Was it a coincidence? Or was this the place Emily should go to find out more? Even though there was no concrete evidence, part of her knew that she couldn't ignore even the smallest trace. Questions kept swirling in her head. How could Thomas be related to Lily? Was he hiding something shocking? Emily knew there was only one way to find out. She had to go there herself, check the area, and find out anything that could lead her to her daughter. Emily immediately decided to act. She hastily packed her things and set off for the abandoned lot. Anxiety was building inside her, but her determination kept her from stopping. She couldn't let doubt paralyze her actions. This might be her only chance to find Lily, and she couldn't afford to waste any more time. When she arrived, a strange feeling came over Emily. She looked around and found herself standing in front of a large, secluded lot, with a dilapidated old house at the end of the lot. The house looked abandoned, with cracked walls and broken windows. Yet there was something in the air that Emily couldn't shake off. There was some sign that the house wasn't completely abandoned, a vague feeling in her stomach that she couldn't ignore. She approached the house, her hands trembling as she clutched her bag. Despite her fear, she knew she couldn't turn back. Part of her felt that something was wrong, but the hope of finding Lily was stronger than her fear. She stepped into the house, which had no natural light. Everything around her was silent. Only her footsteps echoed in the silence. She walked down the hallway, trying to find any sign that could help her decipher what was happening here. After a while of searching, she came to a small room at the back of the house. The door was unlocked, but it seemed like someone was inside. The feeling of nervousness and tension once again invaded her heart. She gently opened the door and stepped in, her eyes trying to adjust to the darkness inside. And then, in the dim light, she saw a little girl standing by the window, looking out with a timid and fearful expression. The girl was wearing a pale pink coat, and her long hair fell down to her shoulders. Her eyes were tired, but Emily could not mistake it. It was Lily, her daughter, the girl she had been missing for the past 2 years. Although she was so happy and moved that she was choking with emotion, Emily remained calm. She couldn't rush and had to find a way to approach her gently. Ollie remained standing still, as if she didn't notice her mother's presence. Or perhaps she was too weak to notice the changes around her. Emily felt an indescribable pain when she saw her daughter in this state. She walked closer, gently calling Lily's name. "Lily, honey, it's Mom." Lily turned around, her eyes looking at Emily in surprise. Her eyes seemed hazy, but when she recognized the person standing in front of her, Lily's lips trembled and she slowly walked towards her mother. Emily couldn't hold back anymore. She ran to hug her daughter, feeling Lily's weak body in her arms. The cold feeling from her daughter's body made her cry. "I won't leave you, honey. I found you," Emily whispered, her voice choked with emotion. But then a feeling of unease rose in Emily's heart. She stood up and looked around the room, for the details in the room seemed wrong, as if this place was not only where Lily was imprisoned, but also a place where secrets were hidden that she could not fully understand. Meanwhile, Emily saw an old photo on the table, a photo of Lily when she was young. But what stunned her was the man in the photo, Thomas Gray, whom she had met before, standing next to Lily in the photo. Emily's heart stopped when she realized the truth. Thomas was not just a charity worker. He was the one behind everything that happened to Lily. Thomas had used the organization's reputation to cover up his wrongdoings, and now he had been keeping her daughter for 2 years. Emily felt her nerves flaring, and her suspicions were now hauntingly real. She looked at Lily, sensing the worry in her daughter's eyes. Emily's instincts told her to get Lily out of here immediately, but she also knew that confronting Thomas would not be easy. But she had to be careful. Emily hugged Lily tightly, then looked back at the abandoned house, knowing that this was not a safe place for them to stay much longer. She would have to face Thomas. But first, she needed to get Lily out of here. As Emily held Lily tightly in her arms, she felt her daughter's weakness and exhaustion. All her emotions were suddenly overwhelming. After 2 long years of searching, the pain of loss, disbelief, and worry had turned to relief that she was still alive. But at the same time, in Lily's eyes, Emily saw something different, a deep fear that she had experienced. For the first time, Emily felt the darkness not only from Lily's disappearance, but also from the person she had trusted, Thomas Gray. Lily sat down next to her mother, still looking out the window, her face sad and tired. Emily slowly sat down next to her daughter, gently stroking Lily's hair. "I love you so much," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Can you tell me what happened? I've been looking for you for years." Lily sighed, then looked up at her mother, her eyes filled with pain and fear. "Mom, I can't take it anymore," she said, her voice soft but desperate. "Mr. Thomas, he's not what you think. He's not a good man. He lied to us. He told me I would be helped, but really you and the other kids, we were just pawns in his game." Emily looked at her daughter, unable to imagine what Lily was going through. But she knew she had to be patient. "I know, Lily. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I'll get you out of here. I'll protect you." Lily began to tell the story. Thomas pretended to be a child protector at the Green Hills charity. He said he would help kids like me, kids who didn't have families. He said he would put us in a special program to help us, teach us good things. But it was all a lie. Every word Lily said was like a blow to Emily's heart. "What did Thomas do to you, Lily?" Emily asked, trying to stay calm. Lily choked back a sob. "He brought us here, to this house. We weren't allowed to go out. No one was allowed to contact our family. He said it was a safe place, but he was holding us hostage. He wanted to use us." Emily felt a wave of anger rise inside her. Thomas, the man she had trusted, the man she had met, the man she thought was a good man, was the con man behind these crimes. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She couldn't take it anymore. Pain, horror, and shock washed over her. But Emily didn't have time to grieve. She had to act now. Lily continued, "We didn't know that there were many other children who had gone missing before, just like me. He tricked us all, taking advantage of the trust of families and communities. He pretended to be a protector, but in reality he was just building a network to carry out his evil deeds." The feeling of fear grew in Emily's heart. What had Thomas done to these children? Emily couldn't let this continue. She knew she had to act immediately. She stood up, pulling her phone from her pocket, her palms sweaty. "I'm calling the police, Lily. They'll help us." Emily called the police immediately, her voice urgent and worried. "Please, I need help right away. My daughter, Lily, has been missing for 2 years, and we just found out that a man named Thomas Gray has been keeping her and other children in an abandoned house. He's a con man and is using charities to do wrong things. Come here now, I need you to come here right away." Emily hung up, but couldn't calm down. She stood there, looking into the dark room, thinking about what had just happened. A feeling of horror filled her. Thomas was not only a con man, but a dangerous man, someone she had once thought she could trust. And now he was the one who had ruined Lily's life and the lives of the other children. A moment later, police sirens sounded in the distance. The police arrived immediately, with police cars parked along the road leading to the wasteland. They immediately surrounded the house, preparing to arrest Thomas. The police quickly arrested Thomas and put him in the police car, although he still tried to resist. Emily stood there, watching, an indescribable feeling rising in her heart. She had found Lily, but the truth behind everything was too horrifying. As the police checked the house and the surrounding areas, they discovered more evidence of the previous missing children. The documents left behind, the old photos, all show the huge network of fraud that Thomas had created. Children were exploited, hidden, and controlled all the time. This was not just a kidnapping, but a large criminal network, and Emily and her family were unwittingly caught up in it. The police continued to investigate and arrested Thomas's accomplices, who helped him in this scheme. Other children were also rescued, but their lives were deeply damaged by what happened. Emily hugged Lily, feeling some of her pain eased, but could not forget what had happened. Thomas, the person she once trusted, now faced serious charges: kidnapping, fraud, crimes against children. He would pay for his evil actions. But for Emily and Lily, this was just the beginning of a new journey. They would have to learn to heal, to rebuild their shattered lives together. When the dust settled, Emily sat in the small room of the house she and Lily had lived in, looking at her daughter. Even though she was back, things were not the same. The pain of 2 years of being missing, the suspicion and the feelings of betrayal from someone she once trusted, still haunted her. But most importantly, Lily was back, and now, together, they would start over. When Emily looked into Lily's face, she saw a new light in her daughter's eyes. Although the emotional wounds would not heal immediately, it was a start, a chance for them to heal. She could not forget the hopeless days of searching for Lily. But now, with her daughter standing before her, Emily knew that all the pain of the past would no longer be heavy. Emily held Lily tightly, feeling the warmth of her daughter's body. The feeling, though still filled with grief and loss, brought a sense of peace. "You always loved me, honey," Emily whispered, catching her breath. "You never gave up." Lily turned to look at her mother, her eyes filled with tears. "Mom, I can't believe I'm back. I thought I'd be stuck in the dark forever, never to find my way back." Emily stroked Lily's hair, comforting her gently. "But you're stronger than I thought. You're home now, and we're going to do everything we can to heal." They returned to their home in California, which had been their family home, but now felt different. The house, with its familiar walls, seemed to envelop them, providing a sense of security they'd been missing for the past 2 years. All the memories of their years together came flooding back, but it was as foreign as a distant dream. While Emily cannot deny the pain they have endured, she also realizes that each step they take is a step forward, even if the past remains fresh in their hearts. Lily needs time, and so does Emily. But with her mother's unconditional love, she knows that her daughter will find peace in her heart, even as she faces the ghosts of her past. The journey to recovery is not always easy. Every day, Emily has to work to care for Lily, comforting her when painful memories return. She is no longer the child Emily remembers. The loss has made Lily quieter, but sometimes glimmers of hope appear in her eyes. Gradually, Lily learned to laugh again, and happy moments returned to their family. Emily took Lily to a therapist, who helped her gradually overcome her feelings of fear and loss. Many of the conversations with the therapist were not easy, but they also opened up opportunities for Lily to face emotions that had been hidden for a long time. Gradually, Emily noticed a change in her daughter. Lily began to talk about what she had experienced, about her fears and hopes, about her days locked away in the abandoned house, and about her sad memories with Thomas. It was not easy for Lily to talk about what had happened, but each time she did, she got closer to healing. The painful emotions did not disappear immediately, but the gradual release helped Lily feel lighter, as if she were finding herself again. One afternoon, as they were sitting in the garden, Lily turned to her mother and said, "Mother, I miss the peaceful days before I disappeared. I miss the times we used to walk together, laugh together. I hope that one day I won't be afraid anymore." Emily looked into her daughter's eyes, her heart filled with happiness. "You will find peace again, my love. I will always be by your side. No matter what happens, I will always be here to help you stand up." As the sun set, Emily and Lily sat silently together, looking at the distant horizon. The painful days were over, but they were no longer afraid. Together they overcame the challenges, found each other again, and more importantly, they knew that family love was always the strongest support for them to move forward. Although there were unforgettable pains, faith and connection would help them become stronger every day. The story ended, but Emily and Lily's journey never ended. They will continue to go on, continue to overcome all difficulties together, rebuilding their lives and the love they lost. Framed from seemingly insurmountable challenges, they found freedom, a reminder of the power of faith, of motherhood, and of human resilience, even in the face of the deepest wounds. Story 2. The snow fell lightly on the warm gray roofs of the small town of Hartwell, Vermont. It was a cold December, but David Foster felt as if the air had never been warmer. This weekend, they would celebrate their first Christmas together as a family of 4. His wife, Marianne, was in her last trimester, and their 6-year-old daughter, Ella, had already picked a name for her baby brother, Leo. Ella was always like that, sweet, thoughtful, and sensitive to the changes in the house. That morning, Marianne insisted on taking Ella to the local supermarket herself to buy some gingerbread cookies. She said she was fine, just wanted to get out of the house for a bit. David hesitated, but Marianne gave him a tired look and a forced smile that he couldn't bear to say no. Before they left, Ella turned around and hugged David tightly around the neck and whispered, "Remember to eat breakfast. Dad, I bought you cookies." The door closed, leaving a silent space in the kitchen, still warm with the smell of coffee. David washed the glasses, cleaned the stove, and made a few business calls. About 45 minutes later, he heard a car screech to a halt outside. Before he could look through the curtains, Marian rushed in, her face as white as a sheet of paper, her hands shaking. "David, I didn't see Ella anymore. She was there. Then I went back to get my wallet and then she was gone." Her words were broken. He didn't understand right away, but then the blood drained from his heart. Ella was gone. David gritted his teeth. "Gone? What do you mean, Marianne?" she repeated, clutching his shoulders. "I searched the whole parking lot, called out. No one saw our child." The police arrived within 10 minutes. The entire supermarket area was cordoned off, security cameras were checked. There was no footage of Ella leaving the car with her mother. But Marianne insisted that she had opened the car door for Ella to get out. "She waved at me. She was a few steps ahead of me, and I only turned back to get my purse. Just a few seconds, people began to whisper in the wind. That Marianne must have remembered wrong, that women in labor are forgetful, that Ella might not have gotten out of the car at all." But David knew his wife wasn't lying. He saw real panic in her eyes, not fear of being suspected, but the undefined terror of someone who had just lost something precious. The snow fell harder in the days that followed. The media came, issued an Amber Alert across the state. The police searched every corner, every person in Hartwell, dogs, helicopters, volunteers, all without finding a trace. No leads, no witnesses. No one who saw the little brown-haired girl in the red coat leave the parking lot that day. 3 months later, the case was closed. People quietly moved on to other things. But not David. He kept the little red coat on the hanger by the door. Every time he picked it up, he remembered Ella that morning, her eyes sparkling, her tiny hands grasping the gingerbread cookies, smiling brightly. One night, David dreamed of her lying in his arms, whispering, "Daddy, don't be sad. I'm just around the corner." The basement was cramped, with no windows. Ella lay on her side, holding the ragged doll. She leaned her ear against the wall, whispering, "Is it going to rain today, Mom?" Then she nodded, smiling. "It's okay. I'll paint more sunflowers to brighten the wall." For years wasn't a long time, but for David, it was an endless punishment. He'd learned to live without Ella, but he'd never learned to stop thinking about her. Marion lived 20 minutes away now, in an outpatient psychiatric facility. The doctors called it severe postpartum depression, something that had come like a storm after Leo was born. Marianne was not the same woman. She was quiet, staring into space, occasionally asking David irrelevant questions, like, "Did Ella eat her vegetables today? Or did you lock the bunker?" Even though no one knew what a bunker was, David still brought Leo to visit his mother every week. He didn't remember his sister, only knew Ella through pictures and short stories his father told him every night. David didn't want Leo to grow up in the dark, but he couldn't completely light up a house whose heart was missing. They lived in the old house, the place that had once been home. David didn't move. He couldn't. Everything in the backyard remained mostly intact, except it was now more desolate. Every time he stepped out there, he felt like something was unfinished. And then, something strange began. At first, it was just a late autumn afternoon. The wind blew gently through the porch. David was pruning some apple branches when he heard a small sound like a child talking, very soft, like a child whispering to a doll. He stood up, his heart beating fast, and turned around. There was no one. The neighbors were hundreds of meters away, and the children around here were all grown up. He shook his head. It could be the wind, or an echo from his imagination born of nostalgia. But then a week later, when he was raking the dry leaves in the backyard, the sound rang out again. It was still that vague sound, a tiny, chirping voice, as if talking to itself. David stood still. It wasn't a bird. It wasn't a falling leaf. And it couldn't be his imagination because it repeated. He started to record his phone whenever he worked in the yard. After several attempts without success, there was a recording that made him shiver. It was a light, rainy afternoon. When he opened the file, slowed it down, adjusted the frequency, he heard it clearly, "Daddy, Daddy," just a few words. But that voice was Ella. How could he not recognize it? It was the sweet voice that called him every morning. But reason screamed in protest. Ella was gone or taken away somewhere. How could she be so close? David began to observe everything. Every evening, when the wind blew through the trees on the right side of the backyard, he would stand still, trying to capture that sound. He tried placing the microphone in the garden, changing the position each time. He even brought the recording to a sound engineer who said, "The sound seems to be coming through a small space. Maybe a water pipe or a vent," but his house did not have a vent in the yard. One night, David stayed up all night, sitting and reviewing the house plan that he had kept when he built the backyard. And then he saw something strange, a patch of dirt near the corner of the yard, with a concrete foundation that had been poured before he bought the land. At the time, he thought it was the old foundation from the old house that had been torn down, but now he wasn't so sure. The next morning, he got out his shovel. He was fast asleep, and he needed to feel like he was doing something real. The sky was gray. The ground was still damp from the rain last night. David started digging. Each layer of dirt he removed, each inch, made his heart pound harder. Nothing, he told himself. "I'm going crazy, just like Marion had." But then his shovel hit something hard, a layer of cement. Very thin, not a foundation, and right in the middle of it, a small metal ring, like a handle. David froze. Cold sweat broke out under his shirt, even though it was only 6 degrees. He used both hands to dig more dirt, revealing a round lid metal with a mechanism that opened like a vault door. No lock, no seal, just time and silence. He didn't open it right away. His whole body was frozen with fear that all those years of trying to cope with loss might have been spent right next to the truth right under his feet. From below, a soft voice spoke. "Dad, have I been a good boy?" David couldn't remember how he'd opened the hatch. His hands were shaking so much he'd almost dropped the handle as he pulled it up. The cold metal, rusted at the edges, made a soft hissing sound as it slid open, like a groan from somewhere that hadn't been touched in too long. The damp chill rose from below. A musty, pungent smell of damp earth, old wood, and something else a scent somewhere between the stale and the living. David bent down, eyes straining to see into the darkness. A small space appeared, about 6 feet deep and less than 6 feet square. There were no windows, no other way out than the one he'd just opened. In one corner was a small mattress made of rags, surrounded by homemade objects, a few torn books, a doll missing an arm, and a scribble on the wall, a house with 3 people standing side by side. And in the middle of the cellar was Ella. She was a small, skinny little thing David took for a mannequin. Her hair was tangled and plastered to her cheeks, her skin pale to the point of being green. As the first light filtered in from the mouth of the cellar, Ella cowered, covering her face with her hands, whimpering like a cornered stray cat. David choked. He couldn't believe his eyes. "Ella?" His voice cracked like a child's. "My daughter, is that you?" She didn't answer. She just shivered, retreating into the corner, making a series of indistinct whispers. Her lips moved as if she were talking to someone or to herself. David realized this was the sound he had heard on the recordings. A wind blew behind him, bringing with it a biting cold. David quickly pulled on his coat, untied his scarf, and knelt down beside the mouth of the pit. "Ella, it's Daddy. Daddy didn't come to scare you. Daddy came to take you home." The girl shook her head, her eyes wide and unblinking. The gaze was not human. It was like a creature that had been kept too long in the darkness, where time and language had become distorted. David put his hand to the mouth of the pit, trying to calm himself. "Do you remember the bear cookie I made for Christmas? You said it looked like your face, and I had to bite its ear first. Wait for a moment." Very briefly, her eyes fluttered. He continued, his voice almost sobbing. "And you kept a piece of cookie in your pocket to eat before bed. Do you remember when Daddy sang 'You Are My Sunshine' when you were afraid of the rain?" Ella curled up, then suddenly made a choking sound. Then a word, small, hoarse, almost a whisper. "Dad." David couldn't wait any longer. He slid slowly down into the cellar, not in a hurry, not in a hurry. Underfoot was soft earth, rotten wood, and the obvious signs of a poorly maintained but purposeful cellar. As she got closer, Ella shrank back a little, but didn't scream, didn't run away. David knelt down in front of her, keeping his eyes level with hers. "Baby, I'm sorry, I'm too late." He reached out very slowly and touched her hand lightly. Her skin was as cold as ice, but Ella didn't pull away. She just looked at him, then collapsed, her whole body shaking, her shoulders convulsing, and a cry escaped her like the first sob after a long nightmare. David hugged Ella, wrapping his arms around her small body that was now nothing but bones and breath. She didn't say anything, just buried her face in his chest, her arms clutching his shirt as if she was afraid he would disappear. He didn't know how long he'd been sitting underground. Only when there was a call from above, a neighbor, a policeman, an ambulance, did David look up and whisper, "Daddy, take me home." Every day she drew a picture on the wall, a picture of her mother, a picture of her father, a picture of her baby. Every night she told a story to her mute doll, calling it guard. Every time she was hungry, she waited for the sound of the sliding door opening, the familiar hands reaching down for food, eyes dim in the small flashlight. Every time it rained, she sang the familiar lullaby, hugging herself, but today was different. The door didn't open. Today, the call was different. Not mother. Not silence. Today, Dad. David had sat by Ella's bedside all evening, holding her hand tightly, as if letting go would cause her to disappear into nothingness. The doctors checked on Ella, constantly malnutrition, lack of light, lack of vitamins, but Ella survived. She was alive and breathing right next to him. A few hours after Ella was taken to the hospital, the police came to David. Marianne has been taken to headquarters for questioning, they said curtly. David stood still, his heart unable to name the feeling. He didn't ask why, anymore because a part of him already knew. Marianne sat in the interrogation room like a shadow of herself, but her coat was rumpled, her hair was tangled, and her eyes were still lost, as if she were drifting in another world. At first she said nothing. The police asked. The doctors asked. Even David was brought in. He sat across from the woman he had sworn to spend the rest of his life with, now separated from him by a cold glass and a wordless chasm. Marianne, that's our child, David said. His voice choked. Why? What did you do? How could you? But Marianne just looked down at the table. Her lips pressed together so hard they bled. Took 3 days. After hours of sedation, the psychiatrist finally got her to speak. The first thing she said wasn't about Ella. It was about Leo. I'm scared of her. I'm scared of Ella killing her brother. The room was silent, as if someone had sucked the air out of it. The psychiatrist sat down with David and the police to explain. We've diagnosed Marianne with postpartum psychosis, a rare and severe form of postpartum depression. It affects only about 1 or 2 people in every 1,000 births. Symptoms include delusions, hallucinations, extreme mood swings, and uncontrollable behavior. Victims may believe that they or a loved one are being threatened. For Marianne, those delusions were directed at Ella. She truly believed that Ella would harm Leo. She didn't hate Ella. In her mind, hiding Ella was a way to protect both children. David leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. He recalled the puzzle pieces that had once confused him. Marianne's innocent questions about Ella, the mention of the bunker, the look of fear when she mentioned Leo crying near Ella. Everything now connected into a painful picture. The day Ella disappeared, Marianne had parked her car as usual in front of the supermarket. Ella sat in the back seat, happily playing with her doll. But just minutes before entering the store, Marianne had heard Ella laughing, and in her intense hallucination, she had taken it for sarcasm, foreboding. In her warped imagination, Ella had become a threat. Marianne no longer saw her daughter's face, but the image of someone who would harm the baby in her womb. When she looked down at her purse, she did not return to the supermarket. Instead, she drove home, but not through the main entrance. She opened the back gate, pulled Ella into the yard, and led her to a small cellar that had been built as a storm shelter. She had told David that she would fill it up after Leo was born, but he never did. Marianne stuffed her in, saying, "Stay here for a while. I have to protect your brother." Ella didn't understand and cried out for help. Marianne locked it loosely, thinking she would release it after a few days. But the hallucinations grew more and more intense. She imagined there was a war out there, and that the child needed to stay out of the light, needed to lie still to survive. Day after day, she brought food through the small opening, talking to her as if she were playing the role of a protective mother in a war zone. She told Ella about invisible bombs, about savage soldiers looking for naughty children. Ella cried at first, but then grew quiet. Her young mind was led into a twisted fantasy world where her mother was a sentry and the bunker was a safe haven, wherein Ella was not found. Marianne was paralyzed with fear of being discovered, fear that she had actually done something wrong, but also fear of losing both children. And she lived in that thin line, mother and captor. David sat in the car, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. This pain was not the same as the pain of 4 years ago. It was the pain of understanding that sometimes evil comes not from hatred, but from a broken mind. At the nursing home, a few weeks later, Marianne sat on a wooden chair, the wind blowing through the half-open window. David came to visit, alone. Ella was not ready to see her mother. She was still in therapy. Marianne looked at him, her eyes no longer panicked, just empty, like someone who had just woken from a long coma and found herself standing in the ashes she had set. "Ella, is she alive?" she asked. David nodded. "Yes, but she cannot forgive." "You should not ask for forgiveness either. Heal first." Marian nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't remember everything, but I remember her saying, 'I'm scared of the dark, Mom,' and I put her in there." Ella stayed in the hospital for nearly 6 weeks. Her physical recovery was slow but steady. She was eating well, sleeping in a real bed, and seeing sunlight through a window for the first time in 4 years. But her spirit was different. The doctors called it a prolonged separation reaction when a child is confined to a limited environment and is influenced by the illusions of a caregiver. So her sense of reality becomes distorted, even broken. Ella didn't recognize David as her father. The first few times he entered the room, she backed away, eyes frightened, clutching the old, nameless doll she'd brought from the basement. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just kept quiet and watched him with a strange gaze. David took his time. He knew that persistence would be the first thread to mend the torn bond between them. The first day, he sat in the corner of the room, reading aloud from a children's book Ella had loved, The Snowy Day. She didn't respond. The second day, he brought a family photo from the snow festival and placed it on the bedside table. The third day, he brought colorful beads, reminiscent of the bracelet they had made together when Ella was 5. "Do you remember?" he asked, not expecting an answer. "You said red was the color of the sun rising in strawberry milk. I didn't understand, but you insisted that I add a red bead in the middle." Ella remained silent, but that time, David saw her eyes flicker a little. Every afternoon, David came. No pressure, no touching Ella if she didn't want to. He sat by the bed, talking about little things. Leo had started to tread water. The tomato patch in the backyard was bearing fruit. And the neighbor's cat, Luna, still came scratching at the window every morning for fish crackers. A week later, Ella whispered her first words since leaving the cellar. "Luna, is her whiskers still broken?" David nodded, choking on his words. "Yes, she's getting lazier. But you know what? She still sleeps in my bed every night." That left Ella silent for a long time. Pine. Then she turned her head to look out the window. No tears fell, but David knew the ice was starting to crack. Marianne had been transferred to a Vermont mental institution. No one had told Ella about her mother. She hadn't asked. That was right, David thought. But every week, Marian wrote a handwritten letter. Not long, no explanation, just whispers from a place emptier than the cellar. "Honey, I don't know where to begin. There are days when I miss you so much I can't breathe. But I'm also afraid you'll miss me. Because if you miss me, you'll remember what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope that one day you'll be free, strong, and know that I tried in the most twisted way to protect you. Boysengain, if you can draw a tree. So I know you're seeing the light. Your mother." David didn't give Ella the letter right away. He just folded it and put it in a wooden box with the things they'd use when she was ready. 3 weeks later, late one afternoon, David walked into the room and found Ella sitting on the floor. She was stringing beads. "Dad," Ella said hesitantly, "I don't remember everything, but the red is in the middle, right?" David nodded. His throat tightened, and he didn't try to hide it. "Yeah, like the sun rising in strawberry milk." Ella looked at him for a long time, then held out her hand, holding a small bracelet. "I made you a new one. Do you want to wear it?" David bent down, holding out his wrist. The bracelet tightened around his wrist like an old wound closing. It was the first time in 4 years. Ella touched him with love, not fear. That evening they read together. David didn't need to read aloud anymore. Ella read with him, her voice hesitant, but full of life. She told him that in the cellar, she had imagined a flying chair to explore the moon, and that the doll had no name, so she called it Silent. "Silent told me not to forget you, but I forgot. Do you remember now, Dad?" David hugged Ella tightly. "You don't need to remember everything. We'll start over together." 6 months after Ella was found, laughter returned to the house that had been swallowed by silence. It didn't come in bursts. It didn't explode like fireworks. It came slowly like a thin mist that dissipates in the morning sun, revealing light behind a curtain. Ella had grown accustomed to the daylight. The first few times she stepped out into the yard, she still flinched when the sunlight touched her skin. But then David let Leo run around the yard, laughing with the leaves, holding his sister's hand and shouting, "Ella, go! The sun is beautiful." And then Ella laughed, shyly tiny but real. She went back to school. Not in a hurry. It was a special class where the teachers were mentally prepared, where her friends were children with their own invisible cracks. David worked part-time to pick her up and drop her off every day. Every afternoon, he sat at the coffee shop across from the school, waiting for the bell to ring, just to be sure, just to see Ella walk out that door under the real sky in real life. Ella still hadn't asked about her mother. She knew even if she didn't say it, knowing that something was broken, but not strong enough to pick it up and look at it. David didn't force it, but each week he added something to the light box, a letter from his mother, a picture Ella had drawn, a phrase her mother had repeated in her childhood, "You are my little light." One day he believed Ella would open it herself. Spring came. David decided to plant an apple tree. He chose the same spot, the place that, for the past 4 years, had hidden his daughter from the world and from his own heart. No one objected. The neighbors helped. Ella sat with a small shovel, drawing a design for the apple tree, with buds as big as balloons and apples as red as hearts. The day of planting, the weather was cool. The wind blew through the eaves, gently waving the window curtains that had been silent for so many years. David bent down, his hand touching the soil that had haunted him. "Are you sure this is the place?" he asked. Ella nodded. "I want to bury it, not to forget, but to grow it again." They set the tree down. Ella gently sprinkled handfuls of soil. Leo mixed in the compost. David watered it, quietly, as if watering a forgotten memory. But in May, the apple tree sprouted, the delicate green of its promise. Ella sat under it every afternoon, bringing books and crayons and the occasional cookie to share with Leo. She no longer called the doll Silent. It had a real name now, Hope. David remembered hearing Ella whisper, as the wind blew through the leaves, "We were underground. Now we're going up, right?" The psychiatrist said Ella had made a remarkable recovery. But he knew nothing was normal. She was a different person, now deeper, quieter, but no longer shaken by the world. "How did you get down there?" Leo asked at dinner one night. Ella put down her spoon, thought for a moment, and then said, "Because Mom thought she should be hidden, like a treasure in a box." David was silent. Ella continued, "But a treasure needs light to be beautiful. Doesn't it, Dad?" He nodded. For the first time, he didn't feel angry when he heard Marion mentioned, only a dull sadness, like the last dry leaf falling from a branch after winter. One afternoon in late spring, Ella came to David while he was pruning the apple tree. "Dad," she said, "you have Mom's letters, right?" David stopped. The wind blew through the trees again, gently ruffling their hair. "Yes, Dad, I want to read one." He didn't ask why. He just nodded and then went inside with his daughter. He took the wooden box, opened it, and handed Ella the first letter. She held it in both hands, reading slowly, not crying, not smiling, just nodding. "Mommy's not mean," Ella whispered. "I was just broken somewhere." David squeezed her shoulder. "Yeah, but I'm working on myself now." Ella looked out into the yard, where the apple tree glistened in the afternoon sun. "I'll forgive you, not because of you, but because I don't want to hate forever." On that night, Ella drew a picture. It was a black hole in the middle of the garden, and from it, an apple tree grew, tall and green. On its branches were 3 red apples, one in the shape of her father, one in the shape of Leo, and a smaller one in the shape of Marianne, smiling. She wrote a line underneath in neat italics, "Where once was the darkest place, light grows, a hole that once hid my daughter's laughter. Now, every time the wind blows through the tree, I hear that chirping sound again. But this time, it's not from pain, it's from hope." Story 3. In 2003, 5 young women, including Emily Harper, disappeared without a trace while on a trip to the top of Pikes Peak, Colorado, a mountain notorious for mysterious disappearances, where tales of darkness and silence seem to forever hide the truth. A light rain fell on the winding roads of Colorado Springs, covering the majestic mountain scenery with a layer of mist. James Harper, a man in his 50s, sat motionless in his small living room, his eyes fixed on an old photograph on the table. But the film, yellowed with age, showed the 5 young women standing at the Pikes Peak rest stop on a summer day in 2003. In the middle was his daughter Emily, her eyes bright and her smile radiant. She was 20 years old, full of life, and eager to travel with her friends. But the trip had taken her away from him forever. Today, May 17, 2008, marks 5 years since Emily and the other 4 girls disappeared without a trace. James clutched the photo, his fingers trembling as he ran his fingers over his daughter's face. He had lost his wife to illness 10 years earlier, and Emily was all he had left. Now, the pain of losing a child was like a wound that would never heal, reopened every year on this fateful day. He stood up, put on his raincoat, and decided to go to the house of Mike, his best friend and father of Anna, one of the missing girls. Mike understood his pain better than anyone. Mike's house was a few blocks away, simple but cozy. When James knocked on the door, Mike opened it, his sunken eyes revealing exhaustion. They didn't need many words. They just sat down quietly with 2 cups of hot coffee. On the table, Mike placed a wooden box containing Anna's mementos, handwritten letters, photos, and a small bracelet. James took Emily's photo from his pocket and placed it on the table. The two were lost in their memories, stories about 2 girls who used to be best friends, who dreamed of a bright future. While flipping through old photos, James accidentally stopped at a group photo at the Pikes Peak rest stop. He had seen this photo hundreds of times, but today one detail made his heart beat faster. In the far corner of the photo, a middle-aged man in a ranger jacket stood silently, his eyes seemingly directed towards the girls. What was unusual was that he was not wearing a name tag, contrary to the strict regulations of the Pikes Peak area. James pointed at the man, his voice hoarse. "Mike, does this person look familiar to you?" Mike squinted, then shook his head. "Probably just a passerby. What's wrong?" But James couldn't shake off his uneasy feeling. He had heard stories about Pikes Peak, which was known as the mysterious mountain with unexplained disappearances from the last century. He took the photo, determined to find out more. While back home, James called Tom Carver, a former park ranger who had worked at Pikes Peak. No one answered. He looked out the window, the rain still falling, and a thought occurred to him: he had to go to the rest stop in the photo. The next morning, James drove up the winding road that led to Pikes Peak. The old rest stop was now in disrepair, weeds growing around the rusted signs. He stood in the exact spot where the girls had stood, trying to picture that fateful day. A cold wind blew, carrying with it an eerie feeling. As he prepared to leave, an older man with a thick beard stepped out from a nearby trail, holding a hunting rifle. "What are you looking for here?" the man asked in a deep voice. James introduced himself, briefly describing Emily's disappearance. The man called himself Tom Carver, not a park ranger but a local hunter. After a moment's hesitation, Tom explained that a few months ago he had found a young woman injured in the woods near Pikes Peak. She was distraught, unable to remember her identity, and was being cared for by a couple in the town of Manitou Springs. James' heart was pounding. "What's her name?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I'm not sure," Tom replied, "but she was in her 20s, brown hair thin." James felt a glimmer of hope, even as he was terrified. He asked Tom for her address and resolved to find her immediately. As he left the rest stop, he clutched the photograph in his hand, the image of Emily urging him on. But deep down he knew that this journey might lead to a truth more painful than he could have imagined. The road to Manitou Springs was covered in fog, the tall pines shimmering in the pale afternoon light. James drove, his mind racing with the image of the girl Tom Carver had mentioned. Could it be Emily? Or just another fragile hope that would vanish like so many others? He stopped in front of a small wooden house with a red tile roof and a garden full of wildflowers. There an older woman, Ellen, answered the door. When James explained why he had come, she nodded, her eyes sympathetic, and invited him in. In the living room, a young woman sat huddled in an armchair, her messy brown hair covering most of her face. She looked up as James entered, her sunken eyes alert. "I'm James Harper," he said, his voice soft. "I'm looking for my daughter, Emily. Are you one of the girls who disappeared on Pikes Peak in 2003? The girl bowed her head, silent, but her hands clenched the edge of her dress, showing her tension. Ellen put a hand on the girl's shoulder, whispering something. Finally, the girl spoke, her voice soft as a breeze. "I'm Sarah Mitchell." Her name made James' heart pound. Sarah was one of the 5 girls, Emily's best friends. He took the photo from his pocket and placed it in front of her. "Do you remember this photo? You took it before you disappeared." Sarah looked at the photo and a tear rolled down her cheek. She nodded, trembling. "I remember. It was the last day we were together." James held back his emotions, trying to keep his voice calm. "Sarah, what happened? Why did you disappear?" The girl shook her head. Her eyes panicked. "I can't tell, they'll find me." But when James mentioned Emily, his voice broke and Sarah seemed unable to keep quiet any longer. She said, her voice cracking, that after taking photos that day, a man claiming to be a park ranger approached the group and offered to lead them to a secret viewpoint. He seemed trustworthy, wearing a uniform and appearing to know the area. But as they traveled deeper into the woods, everything changed. The group was ambushed by 3 other men, tied up, and taken to an abandoned mine near Pikes Peak. There, they were held captive, forced to work in an illegal drug operation. James listened with a wrenching heart. He imagined Emily, his strong but gentle girl, trapped in that nightmare. "What about Emily?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah bowed her head, tears streaming down her face. "She tried to protect us. She fought them off, but I don't know what happened to her. She had escaped in 2007, she said, when a flood had collapsed part of the mine. She had wandered through the woods, exhausted, until Tom Carver found her." James could sense the fear in Sarah's words, but he couldn't stop. He urged her to cooperate with the police, even as she shook her head. "They'll kill me. The chief, he knows everything." But James held her hand, his gaze unwavering. "Sarah, if Emily's alive, I need you to help me find her. And if she's not, I need to know the truth." Sarah finally nodded, though her eyes were still filled with worry. James contacted Linda Hayes, a retired detective who had worked on the 2003 disappearance. Linda, now living outside Colorado Springs, agreed to meet them at a small coffee shop. When James and Sarah arrived, Linda was waiting, her hair gray but her eyes sharp. She flipped through old notes, confirming that the case had been dropped due to lack of evidence and pressure from powerful people. Sarah told her story, and Linda immediately focused on the detail about the park ranger. "Do you remember his face?" Linda asked. Sarah nodded, pointing to the photo James had brought. "That's him. I'll never forget that look." Linda squinted, recognizing the man in the photo. "Carl Dutton," she said, her voice low. "He was a park ranger, fired in 2002 for taking bribes. I suspected he was involved, but there wasn't enough evidence." James felt his blood boil. Carl Dutton, this guy was the key to the truth now. Linda offered to take Sarah to the police station, but the girl was still shaking, afraid. James took her by the shoulders, his voice firm. "You're not alone. I'll be here." As they left the cafe, the red sunset cast over Pikes Peak, a warning of secrets to come. James knew this journey would not be easy, but he had come too far to turn back. The sky over Colorado Springs turned a deep gray as James, Sarah, and Linda drove to the downtown police station. The air in the car was heavy. Only the steady sound of the engine broke the silence. Sarah sat in the back seat, her hands clasped together, her eyes averted at the passing streetlights. James glanced at her in the rear-view mirror, seeing that fear still held her captive, despite her agreement to tell the truth. He gripped the wheel, fighting the anger that rose at the thought of Carl Dutton, the man who might have taken Emily from him. At the police station, Linda led them to Lieutenant Robert Kane, a veteran officer who had worked with her on the 2003 case. Kane, with his salt and pepper hair and deep voice, listened to Sarah's story without interrupting. When she told him about the abandoned mine, Kane's eyes flashed with concentration. That mine, he said, is west of Pikes Peak, abandoned since the 80s. We checked it and found nothing. Linda cut in, her voice sharp. Because you were forced to stop, right? Kane sighed, admitting that the pressure from those involved had stifled the investigation that year. But now, with Sarah's testimony and the photo of Carl Dutton, he promised to reopen the case. James felt a glimmer of hope, but it was quickly extinguished when Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't act alone. There were at least 3 others, and they knew how to cover their tracks. Kane nodded, jotted down notes, and asked Sarah to stay behind to work with an artist to sketch the suspects. James and Linda left the police station, leaving Sarah in protective custody while the police began their investigation. On the way back, Linda shared what she knew about Carl Dutton. He had been a park ranger at Pikes Peak, but was fired for accepting money from drug gangs to turn a blind eye to their activities. He had disappeared from the area, but rumors said he was still lurking somewhere near Pikes Peak, running an illegal operation. If he's behind it, Linda said, we need to find his hideout before he can escape. James suggested going back to the abandoned mine Sarah had mentioned. Linda agreed, but warned that the area was dangerous, especially at night. James couldn't wait, though. He drove home, grabbing a powerful flashlight and an old topographical map of the Pikes Peak area. As the sun set, he and Linda set off, heading west up the mountain. The rough dirt road led them through dark pine forests, the cold air seeping through their jackets. The mine appeared in the moonlight, a desolate landscape of rusted machinery and dark cave entrances. James got out of the car, his flashlight scanning the faint markings on the ground. Linda followed, her hand on the pistol she'd carried since her detective days. They found a side entrance, half hidden by rubble, showing signs of recent digging. James felt his heart pounding. Someone was here, he said hoarsely. They stepped in carefully, the flashlight beam illuminating the damp stone walls. Inside, they found the remains of a makeshift camp, chemical bottles, torn sacks, and a few scraps of old clothing. James picked up a small sweater, his heart stopping. It was the same one Emily had worn in the last photo. He clutched it, pain and hope intertwined. Linda put a hand on his shoulder. We need to tell Kane. This is proof. But before they could leave, a noise came from deep inside the cave, a crunch of rocks underfoot. James turned off the flashlight, and they both held their breaths. A figure emerged, tall and thick with the smell of cigarettes. He stopped, as if sensing their presence. Linda motioned for James to back away, but he stood still, his blood boiling. If it was Dutton, he wanted to face him. The figure suddenly ran, darting out the side exit. James followed, despite Linda's warnings. Outside, in the moonlight, he could just make out an old truck speeding into the darkness. Linda pulled him back, her voice urgent. Don't be reckless. We have evidence. Let the police handle the rest. James nodded, but inside he was still burning with anger. He was right there, the one who had ruined Emily's life. When they got back to the car, James got a call from Kane. Sarah had given more details about an old cabin that Dutton had used as a hideout. The police were preparing to raid it, but Kane asked James to stay calm and not interfere. James agreed, but when he hung up, he exchanged glances with Linda. They both knew they couldn't just sit and wait. Dutton was on the run, and every minute was a chance to erase his tracks. As he drove back to Colorado Springs, James looked out at the Pikes Peak Range, its darkness hiding its secrets. He thought of Emily, of her childhood, of climbing mountains and stargazing. Was she still out there? Or was she just a memory he couldn't let go of? Whatever the truth was, James knew he had to go through with it. Not just for Emily, but for Sarah, for Anna, and for the girls who would never come home. The air in the car was thick as James and Linda drove back to Colorado Springs, headlights cutting through the thick darkness. What they found at the abandoned mine, a sweater like Emily's, traces of the meth lab, was like a knife stabbing at James's heart. He couldn't erase the image of Emily trapped in the darkness, fighting back against those who had taken her freedom. Linda, sitting beside him, checked her pistol again, her eyes sharp but worried. "James," she said, her voice low, "we have to let the police handle Dutton. If you act rashly, things could go wrong." James nodded, but inside he felt the urge to confront Carl Dutton more strongly than ever. When they reached the police station, Lieutenant Kane was waiting. Sarah, looking exhausted but determined, they had completed sketches of the suspects. Kane announced that the task force had located Dutton's old cabin, deep in a remote valley west of Pikes Peak. "We'll raid it at dawn," Kane said. "Sarah will be protected, and I want you two to stay here for your safety." But James couldn't stand it. The thought that Dutton might escape, taking the secret of Emily's fate with him, was unbearable. He looked at Linda, his eyes determined. She sighed, knowing that he couldn't be stopped. "If we go, be careful," she whispered. They left the police station, claiming they needed a break. But instead of going home, James drove toward the valley Kane had mentioned. Linda held the map in her hand, guiding them down the bumpy dirt roads. The pale moonlight the only source of light. The cabin appeared in the darkness, a dilapidated structure hidden behind tall pine trees. There were no lights, no sounds, but James sensed something unsettling. They parked far away, turned off the headlights and approached, moving quietly through the dead leaves. Linda gestured for James to duck as they approached the window. Through the broken glass, they saw a figure moving inside, tall and bulky, loading things into bags. James clenched his fists. It was Dutton. Before Linda could stop him, James pushed the door open, his flashlight shining into the man's face. Carl Dutton, with his tousled hair and cold eyes, stopped dead, a pistol in his hand. "Who are you?" he growled, but his voice was shaking slightly. James stepped forward, fearless. "I am Emily Harper's father. What have you done to my daughter?" Dutton smirked, but his eyes wavered as if he were calculating his escape route. Linda appeared behind James, her gun pointed at Dutton. "Put the gun down, Carl," she said, her voice sharp as a knife. Dutton hesitated, then slowly lowered the gun to the floor, but the evil smile never left his lips. "You don't understand," he said. "It's too late." James lunged forward, grabbed Dutton by the collar, and pushed him against the wall. "Where's Emily? Where are the other girls?" Dutton chuckled, but as James tightened his grip, he began to speak. He confessed that in 2003, he and his gang had kidnapped 5 girls to force them into their drug ring. The mine was the perfect place, remote, unsuspecting. Emily, with her strong character, constantly resisted, which earned her harsh punishment. Dutton told her, in a monotone voice, that 3 years ago in 2005, an explosion caused by a chemical leak had destroyed part of the mine. Emily and 2 other girls, Anna and Rachel, had died in the explosion. The 4th girl, Lisa, had been transferred to another location in Nevada, but Dutton did not know if she was still alive. The confession hit James like a hammer blow. He let go of Dutton and stepped back, his legs almost giving out. Emily was dead. His beloved daughter, the one he had searched for 5 years, was gone. Linda put her hand on his shoulder, her eyes filled with grief, but her voice was firm. "Carl, you will pay for everything." Dutton shrugged, as if it were all a game. Suddenly, car lights flashed outside the door, and police sirens echoed, and the task force had arrived earlier than expected, on a tip from a resident of suspicious activity near the valley. Dutton was handcuffed, his eyes still cold as he was led to the car. James stood there, motionless, watching Dutton's car drive away. Linda led him outside, where the cold mountain air woke him from his daze. "James," she said, "we found the truth. Emily would be proud of you." But the truth was too heavy. James sat down on a rock, his face buried in his hands, memories of Emily flooding back her laughter. The way she had held him so tight, he had hoped to find her, even if it had been a small chance. Now all that mattered was pain. Linda sat beside him, silent, letting him process his loss. As dawn broke, a pale golden light covering Pikes Peak, James stood, his gaze steadier. "We have to find Lisa," he said, "and make sure Dutton never hurts anyone again." They returned to the police station, where Sarah was waiting. When she heard about Emily, she burst into tears, hugging James tightly. She always protected us, Sarah whispered. James nodded, feeling a connection to this young woman who had survived the nightmare Emily could not survive. Kane announced that Dutton would be charged with a series of crimes, and that the federal police were working with Nevada to find Lisa. But for James, this journey was more than a search. It was a way to honor Emily, to make sure her grief was not in vain. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the pines, illuminating Pikes Peak, where dark secrets had been exposed. James Harper stood in front of the Colorado Springs police station, his hands deep in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. The news of Emily's death still weighed heavily on his chest, but the truth, painful as it was, had broken through the wall of silence that had surrounded him for the past 5 years. Carl Dutton was in custody, and the investigation was widening to find Lisa, the only girl who might still be alive. But for James, this journey was more than just a search for the truth. It was a way to keep Emily in his heart forever. Sarah emerged from the police station, her brown hair tied back, her eyes no longer filled with panic. Lieutenant Kane walked beside her, announcing that Sarah would be placed in the Witness Protection Program to ensure her safety, while the police searched for Dutton's accomplices. James looked at Sarah, recognizing her as the last link to Emily, the one who had witnessed his daughter's courage in her darkest days. "Will you be okay?" he asked, his voice soft. Sarah nodded, a weak smile on her lips. "Thanks to you, I found the courage to speak out. Emily, she would have wanted me to live." Her words sent a warm current through James's pain. He held her gently, the way he had held Emily, and whispered, "You're not alone. If you need anything, just come find me." Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears, before being led away by an officer. James returned to his home, where Emily's memento still filled the room. He sat down, holding the photo of the 5 girls at the rest stop, his fingers tracing her face. The pain was still there, but now it was no longer an endless void. He decided to do what Emily would have wanted, to give meaning to her sacrifice. James contacted Mike and the other families of Anna, Rachel, and Lisa, proposing a memorial at Pikes Peak, where it had all begun and ended. A few days later, under a rare blue sky in May, James, Mike, and the families gathered in a clearing near the old rest stop. Sarah was there, escorted by police, along with Linda, who had become an integral part of the journey. They laid bouquets of wildflowers, purple lupins, and yellow daisies on the ground, each bearing a girl's name. No one spoke much, but their presence and their shared grief created an unspoken connection. James stepped forward, his voice steady despite his aching heart. "Emily, Anna, Rachel, you were robbed of your future, but your courage helped us find the truth. We will not let you be forgotten." He looked at Sarah, who was wiping away tears, and continued, "And Sarah, you are proof that hope exists, even in the darkness." Heads were bowed, and the mountain wind carried a whisper of response from the departed. The vigil ended, but James remained, standing alone, looking out at Pikes Peak. The mountain, with its majestic beauty and its mysteries, seemed to tell its own story. He thought of the days he had climbed it with Emily, when she was a child, pointing to the sky and asking about the stars. "Dad, I'll always be here, right?" she had asked. James smiled sadly and whispered, "I'll always be here, in your heart." James's final decision came naturally. He contacted a non-profit organization that supported crime victims, offering to create a fund in Emily's name to help people like Sarah reintegrate into society. He also adopted Sarah into his family, not to replace Emily, but to continue the love his daughter had always believed in. Sarah moved to Colorado Springs, started school again, and worked part-time at a flower shop, gradually rebuilding her life. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The federal police announced that they had found traces of Lisa in a small town in Nevada, but she had not yet been identified. James held out little hope, but he was relieved to know that justice was being served. Dutton was indicted on charges of kidnapping, murder, and drug trafficking. His associates were arrested, and the abandoned mine was sealed, a reminder of the crimes that had once lurked in the shadow of the mountain. One late summer afternoon, James stood on Pikes Peak, where he had once taken Emily to watch the sunset. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of pine trees and a sense of peace he had not felt in years. He took the photo from his pocket, set it on a rock, and whispered, "I will never stop loving you." The mountain was silent, but James felt Emily's presence in every breath of wind, as if she were smiling at him from afar. As the sun set, a golden light bathed Pikes Peak, transforming it into a majestic painting. James turned away, lighter than ever. The pain was still there, but it no longer held him captive. He found closure, not by forgetting Emily, but by living for her, for what she left behind. Pikes Peak stands behind him, eternal and mysterious, a silent witness to the story of lost souls and those who continue to fight for them. Story 4. This case unfolds on April 27, 1935. That morning, Shikuan Huang, a diligent courier for a bank in Hangzhou, set out as usual, carrying a substantial stack of money orders to deliver cash to recipients. A quick aside, banks back then weren't like today's digital systems, where money is just numbers on a screen. In those days, when someone sent you money, the bank dispatched a courier to hand deliver the cash right to your door. Think of it as the express delivery service of the 1930s. Typically, Shikuan Huang started his rounds in the morning and wrapped up by midday. But that day, something was off. By noon, Shikuan Huang hadn't returned to the bank. By 1 or 2 p.m., several frantic clients stormed into the bank, complaining they'd been waiting all morning for their money, but no one had shown up. When the clock ticked past 3 p.m., and Shikuan Huang was still nowhere to be found, the bank raised the alarm, calling in the detective unit of the Zhejiang Provincial Police. When investigators learned that Shikuan Huang was carrying over 6,000 yuan, roughly $40,000 in today's terms, they grasped the gravity of the situation. Shikuan Huang was likely in serious trouble. Now, you might be wondering, why did the police immediately assume Shikuan Huang had met with foul play, instead of suspecting he'd absconded with the cash? The answer is straightforward. As we mentioned, transferring money in those days was a hands-on job. Couriers personally delivered cash to recipients' homes, meaning they carried large sums daily. So, ask yourself, would a bank entrust this role to just anyone? Of course not. In fact, bank couriers needed more than just competence. They required a reliable guarantor. For instance, in the 1930s, switchboard operators at Shanghai's foreign-owned Hongbao Company were formally backed by the Telephone Bureau. Similarly, Shikuan Huang's role as a courier meant he had a spotless record and a reputation for responsibility. That's why the police reasoned that the simplest way to track him down was to retrace his delivery route and question each recipient. Sure enough, when they visited the first and second clients, both confirmed receiving their money around 7 a.m. Shikuan Huang had seemed perfectly normal, no signs of anything amiss. But when investigators arrived at the third recipient's address, things took a turn. The recipient, Mengzhe Zhuang, a pseudonym, lived at 46 Shangshan Bridge Street. When police got there, the front door was locked and it seemed no one was home. This wasn't entirely unusual, so the lead officer planned to move on to the fourth address. But just as they were about to leave, one officer glanced through a crack in the door and spotted something startling: a bicycle inside. And not just any bicycle, it looked strikingly similar to Shikuan Huang's. Without hesitation, the officers broke the iron lock and entered the house. Inside, they found a main room with an octagonal table and several wooden chairs at its center, a tea table nearby. Shikuan Huang's bicycle was propped against the tea table. How did they know it was his? A bank money order had fallen from the bike, lying on the floor. The recipient was indeed Mengzhe Zhuang. More crucially, Shikuan Huang was found in the back room, but he was no longer alive, and his condition was gruesome. His body was covered in red liquid, lying face up on the floor. His head was tightly wrapped in a floral blanket, and an iron file was lodged in his chest. In front of him stood a table with copies of the Ishi and Southeast daily newspapers. A wicker chair lay overturned nearby, suggesting a struggle. The large sum of bank money he'd been carrying? Gone without a trace. This was likely a murder robbery. Given the case's severity, Wenlong Zhao, the Zhejiang provincial police chief, rushed to the scene alongside forensic expert Hanfen Liang. You may not know Hanfen Liang, but his credentials are impressive. He studied in France, earning a doctorate under the renowned forensic scientist Edmund Locard, who pioneered the exchange principle. Liang's expertise was undeniable. After a preliminary examination at the scene, he boldly concluded that the crime involved 3 perpetrators. Here's why. As mentioned, Shi Kuan-Huang's head was wrapped in a blanket. When it was removed, investigators found a knife wound below his left eye and another above his right eyebrow. Yet, neither the eye wound nor the iron file in his chest was fatal. The true cause of death was a blunt force injury to the back of his head. If there were only one killer, there'd be no need for such theatrical weapon switching. Just one tool would have sufficed. Liang reasoned that the 3 weapons pointed to 3 distinct attackers. He reconstructed the crime as follows. When Shi Kuan-Huang arrived to deliver the money, one person opened the door. A second, catching him off guard, threw a blanket over his head. Then all 3 assailants attacked, each wielding a different weapon. Curiously, despite scouring the scene, the police couldn't locate the blunt object used in the fatal blow. Fortunately, Police Chief Wenlong Zhao was a seasoned veteran. He noticed a well in the corner of the backyard and ordered his team to drain it. At the bottom, they uncovered a large iron hammer, an ink stamp box, and a seal bearing the name Meng Zhezhuang. Seeing these items, Wenlong Zhao immediately concluded that the house's tenant, Meng Zhezhuang, was undoubtedly one of the perpetrators. Moreover, the name Meng Zhezhuang was almost certainly an alias. It's not hard to see why Meng Zhezhuang was a prime suspect. Shi Kuan-Huang was killed in his house, which already cast heavy suspicion on him. Now, with his name seal found alongside the murder weapon, his role as a culprit was all but confirmed. But why would he discard his name seal? It's small enough to carry. The only logical explanation is that Meng Zhezhuang was a false identity. The seal was not only useless but could incriminate him if found by police. Better to toss it for safety. With this in mind, the police prioritized investigating Meng Zhezhuang's background. Meng Zhezhuang wasn't the owner of 46 Xiangxiang Bridge Street. He was merely a tenant who'd moved in a month before the crime. The complication: the landlord had only met him once and couldn't recall his face, only that he was a scholarly-looking young man. Worse, the area around 46 Xiangxiang Bridge Street was eerily quiet, with no neighbors nearby, meaning virtually no witnesses. Luckily, the sharp-eyed forensic expert, Hanfen Liang, picked up on a subtle clue. While examining the body at the scene, he detected a faint smell of paint, suggesting the house had been recently repainted. Since the landlord had rented it to Meng Zhezhuang a month earlier, the painting was likely commissioned by the tenant. If so, the painters must have met him. Sure enough, after extensive inquiries, the police tracked down 2 painters who'd worked at the crime scene. They confirmed that 3 young men had hired them, aligning perfectly with Liang's theory of 3 perpetrators. Though they didn't know which one was Meng Zhezhuang, the tenant, the painters noted that all 3 wore long scholars' robes and spoke with a slight Shanghai accent. They also provided a critical lead. When the painters first arrived, the house was nearly empty, devoid of furniture. But 3 days before the crime, on April 24th, a rickshaw delivered a load of items, the very octagonal table and wicker chairs found at the scene. Could the origin of this furniture lead to the culprits' true identities? To gather as much information as possible, the police split into 2 investigative paths, one to trace the furniture's source, the other to find the rickshaw driver who delivered it. After days of effort, they didn't locate the driver, but did pinpoint the furniture's origin. It was purchased from a woodworking shop about 2 kilometers from the crime scene. The shop owner recalled that a young man bought the furniture in early April. After the purchase, he hired a rickshaw to haul it away. Where exactly? The owner didn't know. This left the police puzzled. Some of you may have already spotted the issue. The painter said the furniture arrived at the crime scene on April 24th, but the shop owner claimed it was transported in early April. Clearly, the furniture wasn't initially taken to the crime scene. So where was it stashed in the interim? A theory struck Wenlong Zhao. Could the three culprits have rented more than one house? The furniture might have been stored elsewhere, perhaps as a temporary hideout or for disguise. Acting on this, Zhao returned to the woodworking shop owner, pressing for a detailed description of the young buyer. Finally, Zhao seized on a pivotal detail. Didn't the buyer leave in a rickshaw? The owner overheard the driver say, "The fare is 1.5 hao." You might wonder, how's that a clue? This is where Zhao's brilliance shone. In the 1930s, Hangzhou, rickshaws were like today's taxis with metered fares, roughly 1 hole per kilometer. A fare of 1.5 hole meant the destination was between 1 and 2 kilometers from the shop. Without a word, Wanlong Zhao drew a 2-kilometer radius around the woodworking shop and ordered his team to canvass every house in the area for suspicious tenants. Soon, a new lead emerged. At 10 Bixing Temple Alley, locals reported that 3 men had rented a house there. They said in early April they arrived with a rickshaw full of furniture, looking like they planned to stay long-term. But oddly, by late April, they abruptly moved out. The house has been vacant ever since. Since Bixing Temple Alley was a bustling area, the police gathered more clues. Some described the tenants as educated-looking. One neighbor recalled chatting with a tenant who claimed to work at Jingjiang Dock. Most crucially, a witness saw a bank courier delivering money to that house. At this, Wanlong Zhao had an epiphany. He could now piece together the culprit's scheme. The group first rented a house in Hangzhou, carefully furnishing it to pose as ordinary tenants and avoid suspicion. Once set up, they arranged for money to be wired to their address, luring a bank courier to rob and eliminate. Why didn't they strike at Bixing Temple Alley, despite preparing it, and instead went to the trouble of relocating to Chongqing Bridge Street? They overlooked a critical detail, the bank's delivery route. The bank prioritized closer addresses first, then farther ones. Bixing Temple Alley was among the last stops on the courier's route. Striking there would yield little cash. That's why they switched to Chongqing Bridge Street, closer to the bank, where the courier would still be carrying a large sum. But even with the crime's mechanics unraveled, so what? The culprits were still at large. Admittedly, this information alone couldn't directly nab the perpetrators, but it was enough for the seasoned Wanlong Zhao to sketch a profile of the suspects. First, based on multiple accounts, all 3 were young, in their early 20s, with accents tinged with Shanghai or Shaoxing inflections. Since many Hangzhou residents then hailed from the Jiangsu, Zhejiang, Anhui region, the police surmised the suspects were likely from Shanghai, Shaoxing, or Zhuji, but frequented Hangzhou and knew it well. Second, analyzing the money order forms filled out by the suspects, the police noted that, though fake, the names showed a scholarly flair. The forms were written with a fountain pen, in neat, elegant handwriting. Combined with reports of them wearing scholars' robes, it was clear the suspects were well-educated, possibly university students. Handwriting analysis revealed all forms were penned by one person. Most telling was their distinctive style. Strokes ended with a slight flourish. Starting points were crisp, and notably, the character for Zhou in Hangzhou was written with an unconventional stroke order. Seizing on this, Wanlong Zhao sent suspect profiles, including handwriting samples, to banks, post offices, and train stations across the Jiangsu, Zhejiang, Anhui region, urging staff to scrutinize for matches. Time slipped by, and months passed with no progress in the investigation. Just when everyone thought the suspects had vanished for good, a breakthrough emerged. On August 28, 1935, for months after the crime, a report came from a clerk at the Hangzhou post office. They had received a letter with the sender's address listed as 33 Zhongqing Alley, Hangzhou. The recipient was a Ms. Luoqing Shi. The letter was mailed from Shanghai, and the sender's surname was Shi. On the surface, nothing seemed amiss. But the clerk's keen eye caught something. The character for Zhou in Hangzhou on the letter closely resembled the suspect's handwriting. Their instincts proved razor-sharp. After expert analysis, the handwriting on the letter and the money orders was confirmed to be from the same person. In other words, the letter's recipient, Luoqing Shi at 33 Zhongqing Alley, must know the culprit. A visit to her could yield answers. Yet, the police hesitated. Why? The residents of 33 Zhongqing Alley weren't ordinary folk. The Shi family was a prestigious clan in every sense. For instance, the late patriarch Dan Shusi was a renowned traditional physician in the Jiangsu Zhujiang region. The current head, Su Tianxi, was an esteemed physician scholar, passionate about calligraphy and collecting rare inkstones, with immense local prestige. Rushing to question them risked two things: tarnishing their reputation and alerting the suspects. After careful deliberation, the police opted to discreetly investigate the younger generation of the Shi family. Given the suspect profile, young, with the sender sharing the Shi surname, the culprit might not be a family friend, but a family member. Indeed, the investigation revealed the Shi family had 3 grandchildren, 1 granddaughter, Luo Qingxie, the letters, and 2 grandsons. Luo Qing was a courteous schoolgirl, at school during the crime, ruling her out. The eldest grandson, Qi Pingxie, was studying abroad, also eliminating him. That left the second grandson, 24-year-old Qi Fingxie, who raised red flags. According to household records, Qifeng was enrolled at Tongji Medical University in Shanghai. But when police inquired, they learned his poor performance had forced him to transfer to Tongda Medical Academy. At Tongda, they were told Qifeng had dropped out long ago, his whereabouts unknown. With no other leads, the police resorted to old-school tactics, staking out the Shi family mansion in Hangzhou and their ancestral temple in Jianshan, Jinhua, waiting for Qifeng to surface. They maintained this vigil for 3 grueling months. Finally, Qifeng appeared at the Jianshan temple. He didn't stay long, quickly heading to Zhuji. Remember, a witness had noted one suspect's Zhuji accent. Tracking him, police discovered Qifeng visited a young man named Xingxuan Lu in Zhuji. Intriguingly, Xingxuan Lu's background mirrored Qifeng's. The Lu family was a wealthy local clan, and Xingxuan, though a university student, was a lackluster scholar. More suspiciously, both Qifeng Shi and Xingxuan Lu were in Hangzhou during the Xiangshan Bridge Street murder. It looked too convenient to be coincidence. Given this, the police summoned all case witnesses to Zhuji to identify whether Qifeng Xie and Xingxuan Lu were the suspects. Shockingly, the witnesses were inconclusive. Some said they didn't match. Others were unsure, leaving police questioning their earlier assumptions. But then a thought struck. Wasn't there a third suspect? If Xie and Lu were involved, there had to be a third person connected to both, whose background and movements around the crime matched the suspect profile. Without such a person, could they have been wrong? The truth proved otherwise. That third person existed, Mingxie Jiang, Xingxuan Lu's 23-year-old cousin from Zhuji. He'd studied at a Shanghai university, but dropped out due to poor grades, drifting into a life of idleness. Coincidentally, he too was in Hangzhou during the murder. Was such a coincidence possible? The police doubted it. They showed Mingxie Jiang's photo to witnesses, and every single one confirmed he was the one who rented the house and handled the money transfers. At this point, the case's full picture came into focus. The remaining task was apprehending the suspects. However, since witnesses only identified Mingxie Jiang, the police lacked grounds to arrest Qi Fingxie and Xingxuan Lu, despite knowing their movements. They targeted Mingxie Jiang first. Where was he? Investigation revealed he'd worked out of province, but was recently fired for poor performance and was planning to return to Zhuji. On December 19, 1935, police seized their chance arresting Mingxie Jiang at a train station. During interrogation in Hangzhou, he quickly cracked naming Xingxuan Lu and Qi Fengxie as accomplices. This led to Qi Fengxie, ever paranoid and on the run, being apprehended in Shaanxi, thousands of miles away. With that, all 3 suspects in the Xiangshan Bridge Street murder were in custody. You might be wondering, these men came from prominent families, hardly strapped for cash. Why commit such a brutal robbery murder? The answer isn't as simple as it seems, and it's likely beyond your wildest guesses. As mentioned, Qi Fengxie started at Tongji Medical University in Shanghai, but was forced to Tongda Medical Academy due to poor grades, only to drop out entirely. Jobless, he traveled to Hangzhou for leisure. One day, passing the Huayang One Flower General Store on Huxin Road, he spotted the shop's beautiful proprietress and fell head over heels. The catch? She was married with 2 children, a boy and a girl. Undeterred, Qi Fengxie pursued her relentlessly, but in an unusual way. Instead of confessing directly, he secretly bought gifts for her children to win them over. Once close, he used them to pass a love letter to their mother. But Qi Fengxie hadn't counted on her integrity. Outraged that he'd manipulated her innocent children, she tore up the letter on the spot and berated him. Qi Feng, however, saw it differently. Far from feeling shameless, he believed she rejected him because he wasn't wealthy enough. Determined to win her, Qi Feng decided to seek his fortune abroad, earning American dollars. But he needed startup capital. His family, aware of his recklessness, wouldn't fund him. So, Qi Feng devised a plan to rob a bank courier. Unable to do it alone, he recruited Xingxuan Lu and Mingxia Jiang, both drowning in gambling debts. At this stage, the investigation could have wrapped up, with the suspects handed over for trial. But Qi Feng's peculiar mindset surfaced again. Perhaps knowing his crimes were severe and hoping to lessen his punishment, he confessed to another murder from 1933. That summer, a child named Hongwen's son was kidnapped off a Hangzhou street. As a descendant of Zhu Ji's wealthiest family, his abduction was clearly for ransom. The Sun family received a call demanding 5,000 yuan, roughly $33,000 today. They paid, but the boy never returned. Days later, his body was found at Wansong Ridge. The case shocked Hangzhou, with even local gangsters publicly condemning the kidnappers for breaking underworld codes. You may have guessed it. Qi Fengxie knew who was behind it. Why call his thinking strange? To atone, he could have exposed someone else's crime. Instead, he admitted that he and Xingxuan Lu committed this heinous act. Meanwhile, Mingxia Jiang, not to be outdone, jumped in, confessing to another crime. He admitted kidnapping Yuki Gu, the dean of Tongda Medical Academy, though the victim escaped. Words fail to describe these 3. Ultimately, the police submitted all evidence and confessions to the court. On January 8, 1936, the judge convicted Mingxia Jiang, Xingxuan Lu, and Qi Fengxie of multiple crimes, sentencing them to death. Weeks later, on the morning of January 27th, the trio was escorted to the execution ground at Gaosong Ridge, where Siqin Huang's body was found. The 3 villains paid for their crimes, but the public uproar they caused lingered. Newspapers ran stories for months. Qi Fengxie's wife, overwhelmed by public scrutiny, suffered a mental breakdown. Mingxia Jiang's family waited until the dust settled to retrieve his body from Hangzhou. Xingxuan Lu's wife, Mrs. Qian, shaved her head and became a nun, leaving many to reflect on the tragedy. In the end, the entire saga was chronicled by the renowned essayist Feng Ziki in his work, Notes from Yuan Yuan Hall, preserved for posterity. Story 5. A tycoon's heir, a president's daughter, a secret child, and a multi-billion-dollar fortune ripped apart in a family feud. It sounds like the premise of a Korean drama, but this is no fiction. It's a real-life saga. Today's protagonist is the heir to SK Group, one of South Korea's largest conglomerates, a man who landed in prison twice in his middle years. His devoted wife waited patiently for him through half her life. Yet, upon his release, he dove headfirst into an extramarital affair, publicly proclaiming his new lover and a 5-year-old child born out of wedlock. The result? A divorce settlement of astronomical value. On a micro level, this is an elite family's internal struggle, but on a macro scale, it could send shockwaves through South Korea's economy. Now, let's dive into the divorce dubbed Asia's most expensive. On March 31, 1961, Roh So-young was born into a prestigious family that inspired envy across South Korea. Her father, Roh Tae-woo, was a titan in the nation's political sphere. Rising from humble roots, he climbed relentlessly to become president, a political grand slam by any measure. The year 1985 marked a turning point for Roh So-young. Her father ascended to the chairmanship of the ruling Democratic Justice Party, poised to assume the presidency. That same year, at age 24, she traveled to the United States to study at the University of Chicago. It was there she met the man who would define her destiny, Choi Tae-won. Choi Tae-won was no ordinary man. He was the son of Choi Jong-hyun, chairman of the Sunkyung Group, now SK Group, one of South Korea's most powerful chaebol families. Founded in 1953, SK stood alongside Samsung, Hyundai, and LG as a cornerstone of Korean industry. Roh So-young and Choi Tae-won, two of South Korea's brightest heirs, met far from home, instantly drawn to each other and swept into a passionate romance. By all accounts, Choi was a fervent suitor. During winter breaks, when university dining halls closed, he cooked for Roh So-young himself. He showed his care through thoughtful gestures, always attentive to her needs. The couple played tennis together often, living a blissful student life that could spark envy in anyone. Their romance, kindled abroad, united two hearts from Korea's most influential dynasties. With love flourishing, marriage became inevitable. In 1988, as Roh Tae-woo won the South Korean presidency, the relationship between Roh So-young and Choi Tae-won gained official sanction. In September that year, they held a private wedding at the Blue House, South Korea's presidential residence officiated by the Prime Minister. After their marriage, they welcomed 3 children. Yet, beneath the seemingly romantic and idyllic wedding lay a reality steeped in strategy. Both families belonged to Korea's uppermost echelons, forming an alliance too weighty to ignore. No matter how you viewed it, this was no simple love match. At the time, South Korean media and prominent commentators openly noted that the union epitomized the deep ties between government and chaebols. Some even criticized it as a marriage of politics and commerce. Why such assertions? As early as November 1980, SK Group stunned the business world with a deal that shook South Korea. The acquisition of the state-owned Korea National Oil Corporation, a behemoth far larger than SK at the time. Korean media called it the shrimp swallowing the whale. Rumors swirled that the deal's success owed much to Roh Tae-woo, then National Security Commander. He allegedly intervened in the bidding process, adjusting rules to let SK acquire UOC at a price far below market value. Following this coup, SK Group entered a phase of meteoric growth. By the early 1990s, as South Korea's economy surged and the government urged conglomerates to expand, SK, bolstered by the Roh family's political clout, solidified its dominance in energy and boldly ventured into strategic sectors like telecommunications, chemicals, and semiconductors, cementing its status as a pillar chaebol. In 1998, Choi Tae-won officially took the helm of SK Group. While maintaining its core businesses, he aggressively expanded into new territories, notably investing heavily to acquire Lone Entertainment, the company once home to K-pop star IU. This move not only strengthened SK's industrial dominance, but also marked its entry into South Korea's booming cultural and entertainment sector. By then, SK Group had risen to become South Korea's third-largest chaebol, trailing only Samsung and Hyundai. But just as SK reached its zenith, Roh Tae-woo, Choi's father-in-law, faced a catastrophic fall. On November 16, 1995, Roh Tae-woo was investigated and arrested in a political purge campaign. He faced charges of amassing and embezzling illicit political funds. Prosecutors revealed he had accumulated illegal assets worth $1.125 billion, a staggering sum that shocked the nation. A year later, the Seoul District Court sentenced him to 22 years and 6 months in prison, a harsh verdict reflecting South Korea's resolve to clean up its political landscape. Yet reality often outstrips even the wildest K-drama plotlines. In December 1997, the Asian financial crisis erupted, plunging South Korea into chaos. To stabilize society, President Kim Dae-jung issued an amnesty for 1,500 prisoners, including Roh Tae-woo. The former Titan served just over a year before calmly walking out of prison and returning home. Though Roh Tae-woo was freed, the scandal dealt a crushing blow to his daughter, Roh So-young. Once a noble heiress, she was now branded the daughter of a corrupt politician, facing relentless public scorn. To shield her husband and SK Group from the fallout, she chose to retreat from the spotlight. While other heiresses attended lavish galas, Roh quietly embraced the roles of dutiful wife and mother, raising their 3 children and ceding the stage to her husband as he built his empire. Thanks to the foundations laid by his father-in-law, Choi Tae-won steered SK Group smoothly, its growth largely unscathed by his wife's family turmoil. We cannot say with certainty whether Choi Tae-won's initial pursuit of Roh So-young was driven purely by love. What is clear, however, is that by this point, his treatment of her began to reflect self-interest. With his position secure and his wife's family in decline, he grew increasingly absent, leaving child-rearing almost entirely to Roh. Within SK Group, she held no formal role or influence. Gradually, she faded into the background of her own marriage, marginalized in both family and career. By 2000 to outsiders, Roh So-young appeared to embody the archetypal chaebol wife, tending to children, managing the household, and making obligatory appearances at family events. But in reality, her life had quietly veered onto a new path. With their children growing up and her marriage to Choi Tae-won reduced to a formality, the couple began living separately. Roh So-young refused to let her life revolve solely around family. On December 1, 2000, she stepped out of her gilded cage and took the role of director at the Nabi Art Center, located on the 4th floor of SK Group Siren Building in Seoul's Jongno District. From then on, the titles Roh Heiress and Choi's wife gave way to Director Roh. It seemed like a fresh start for her career and life, but sadly, this golden period lasted only 3 years. In 2003, Choi Tae-won found himself entangled in legal troubles, sentenced to 3 years in prison for illegal stock trading and embezzlement. Absent in good times, he turned to Roh So-young first when crisis struck. Once again, she stepped up, navigating a storm of challenges, running between contacts, pulling strings, and leveraging relationships to mitigate her husband's sentence, all while fending off a barrage of negative media coverage. Most heartbreakingly, during this turbulent period, their youngest son was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes, a chronic condition requiring lifelong insulin injections. By day, Roh shuttled between courtrooms and prisons. By night, she kept vigil at her son's bedside. Those years ground her down, reality crushing her spirit time and again. Yet, with unwavering resolve and extraordinary strength, she held her together. But does sacrifice always bring reward? After his release from prison, Choi Tae-won resumed his self-serving ways, maintaining the separation from his wife without a hint of gratitude or remorse for the woman who had shouldered every storm during his darkest years. In 2009, fate dealt Roh So-young another crushing blow. She was diagnosed with breast cancer. Shortly after surgery, doctors delivered devastating news. The cancer had spread to her lymphatic system. The once poised and elegant director Roh became frail, her face pallid, her eyes heavy with grief and exhaustion. In this period, Roh So-young all but extinguished any hope in her callous husband. She poured her dwindling strength into her health and running the Navy Arts Center, refusing to waste another moment on the man who had forsaken her. But in an unforeseen twist in 2013, Choi Tae-won found himself behind bars again, this time for embezzlement, sentenced to 4 years in prison. Though her heart had long grown cold, Roh, bound by duty to her family and children, stepped up once more. She lobbied tirelessly, pulling every string to secure aid. Thanks to her efforts and a clemency policy under President Park Geun-hye, Choi served a mere 6 months before striding out, brimming with bravado as if untouched by scandal. One might have hoped that 2 stints in prison would jolt him into reflection. Instead, the opposite unfolded. He not only shunned his family, but flaunted his extramarital affair with brazen disregard. Reports suggest Choi Tae-won's affair began in 2010, during his separation but before any divorce. In a letter to Roh So-young, he formally requested a divorce, citing irreconcilable differences spanning over a decade. He claimed their marriage had grown cold, and that by chance, he had met a woman who offered him true comfort, sparking dreams of a new life. While admitting he should have sought divorce before starting the affair, he excused his inaction, stating, "Too many factors needed consideration." He concluded by expressing a desire for an amicable end to the marriage, promising to compensate Roh and their children for their pain. Notably, Choi publicly acknowledged his out-of-wedlock child, vowing to fulfill his duties as a father and support the child's mother. He declared, maintaining two families simultaneously is impossible and wrong. These words might seem noble, but in the context of Roh So-young's years of raising 3 children alone, like a living widow, while he lived freely with his mistress, such moral posturing rings hollow, stirring bitterness and outrage. Predictably, the letter's release ignited a firestorm across South Korea. Beyond widespread condemnation of Choi as a faithless husband, the public's curiosity fixated on one question. Who was this mistress who could so thoroughly captivate a seasoned steely tycoon, clouding his judgment and driving him to demand her elevation to wife? Choi even proclaimed, "She loves me for who I am, not my wealth." Naturally, South Korea's Sherlock Holmes sleuths didn't rest. Within days, the woman's identity was laid bare. Her name was Kim Hee-young, born in December 1975 in Seoul to a middle-class family. At 17, she moved to Illinois, USA for studies, adopting the name Chloe. In 2002, she married a Korean American, had a son, and gained U.S. citizenship. In the following years, she was active on Cyworld, a popular South Korean social platform, sharing glimpses of a contented family life as a quintessential middle-class wife and mother. But fate took a sharp turn. Cracks formed in her marriage, and by 2008, she and her husband divorced. She left with little but secured custody of her son. Divorced, a single mother, and forging a new path, Kim Hee-young faced a turbulent turning point. It was then that she returned to South Korea. Officially, she met Choi Tae-won at a private gathering in the summer of 2008. But whispers in elite circles tell a more dramatic tale. Rumors claim that as early as 2003, during Choi's first prison term for illegal stock trading, Kim appeared at a prison counseling program as a therapist. Both parties vehemently denied this connection. Yet, aligning the timelines, an earlier covert bond cannot be ruled out. Picture it: a Choi Ball heir confined and conflicted, and a gentle, empathetic therapist skilled at listening. In the vulnerable, cloistered prison environment, emotions like loneliness, pity, or dependency could easily spark. By 2008, Kim, freshly divorced and emotionally adrift, crossed paths with Choi again at a private event. He, burdened by business pressures and a fractured family, was equally unmoored. Their shared vulnerabilities ignited a connection, and their entanglement was hardly surprising. In 2010, Kim Hee-young secretly gave birth to Choi's daughter in Hong Kong. From then on, South Korea's elite quietly dubbed her the Hanam-dong Lady, a nod to the affluent Seoul neighborhood where she resided. In rare leaked photos, Kim didn't exude glamour or hauteur. Instead, she embodied a serene, healing elegance, soft features, subtle makeup, a gentle smile, radiating calm femininity. Perhaps it was this unpressured, non-competitive aura that ensnared Choi, a battle-hardened tycoon, offering him solace. By late 2015, with their daughter reaching school age, Choi, in his words, found courage in love. Through World Journal, he published a 3-page letter admitting his years-long affair, acknowledging his daughter, and formally requesting a divorce from Roh So-young. The timing, however, was impeccably calculated. Why 2015? Beyond the growing difficulty of concealing his daughter, a critical factor emerged. South Korea had just repealed its law criminalizing adultery. Previously proven infidelity could lead to a 2-year prison sentence. With the law relaxed, Choi dropped all pretense, boldly announcing his divorce demand that very night. In truth, he had privately pressed for divorce multiple times, but Roh had consistently refused. According to Hank Yora, the letter's public release aimed to leverage media and public pressure to force Roh's consent. That same night, Roh responded via an interview with Cookman Ilbo. "I don't want a divorce," she said. "I'll do everything to protect my children and family." Her quiet, desperate words stood in stark contrast to Choi's saccharine ode to his true love. Roh appeared fragile, yet resigned, even shouldering the blame, saying, "It's my fault for not understanding his feelings, for hurting him." Astonishingly, she offered to raise her husband's daughter with his mistress, clinging to their hollow marriage. At this point, many might feel indignation, exclaiming, "Why won't she divorce him? Why hold on to a betrayer like that?" But Ro's refusal wasn't rooted in lingering love. She was clear-eyed, employing a temporary strategy. Her aging parents were frail, and she feared a divorce would be a fatal shock. More critically, she held no shares in SK Group. A hasty divorce would leave her with nothing, jeoparding her children's future. Parents who love their children plan for the long term was her guiding principle. Until her children's futures were secured, divorce was not an option. Kim Hee-young, however, lacked such patience. In 2017, she and Choi co-founded the TNC Foundation, named after them both. Kim began flaunting her philanthropy and took on the directorship of Jeju's No Museum. Choi, eager to legitimize Kim as his partner, filed for divorce mediation with Seoul's family court in July 2017. On November 15th, the first mediation session failed when Ro did not attend. The court escalated the case to formal litigation, scheduling a trial for February 2018. The proceedings remained private, but the outcome revealed Choi's failure to secure the divorce. Undeterred, Ro So-young prepared her counteroffensive. Her first step? Scrutinized Choi's assets. Divorce was possible, but only with a fair division. Though Kim claimed to love Choi, not his wealth, Ro quipped she'd take the money. Enlisting a legal team, she analyzed South Korea's asset division laws, SK Group's financial operations, and Choi's potential tactics to conceal wealth. SK's vast fortune, with complex share structures and subsidiary ties, demanded precision to ensure her rightful share. Simultaneously, she fortified her children's futures. Eldest daughter Choi Yoon-young, after graduating from Beijing International School in 2008, studied biology at the University of Chicago. She researched at Chicago's Brain Science Institute, interned at Harvard's Physical Chemistry Lab, and joined SK Group's biotech division in June 2017, rising to a part-time strategy manager. Second daughter Choi Min-young excelled at Peking University in business administration, graduating in 2014. She voluntarily enlisted in South Korea's Navy, a rare move for a chaebol heiress, earning the rank of lieutenant. In 2019, she joined SKH Confluent Semiconductor Research at SK Hynix, focusing on international trade and policy coordination. Youngest son Choi In-jae graduated from Badawan College in physics in 2018, joined Boston Consulting Group, and later SK's energy division via open recruitment. With her children's careers secured within SK, Ro could focus on her counterattack. On December 7, 2019, Ro filed a counter-lawsuit, agreeing to divorce but demanding a division of Choi's assets, including 42.39% of his SK Group shares, valued at approximately $1.18 billion. She also sought a court order barring Choi from transferring SK-related assets and requested $272,727 for emotional damages. These demands rattled Choi and SK, as the asset split could strip him of his majority shareholder status, risking a power struggle. Ro argued that SK's growth owed much to her father, Ro Tae-woo, and her family's contributions warranted a substantial share. Choi countered that the wealth stemmed from generations of his family's efforts, questioning Ro's contributions and the scale of her demands. The dispute transcended a mere divorce, evolving into a power struggle among Korea's elite. Yet, a mother's decades of toil, raising 3 exceptional children single-handedly, cannot be erased with a claim of no contribution. And let's not forget who secured Choi's release from prison twice. South Korean media weighed in. Outlets like Jungang Ilbo expressed sympathy for Ro's counter-lawsuit, viewing her as a victim forced to fight back after years of preserving her family. Conversely, Chosun Ilbo and others criticized the public spectacle, arguing Ro's demands were excessive and hinted at a power grab. Public sentiment largely favored Ro, decrying Choi's infidelity and harsh treatment as morally unjust. The narrative of the wife's revenge gained traction, becoming a societal flashpoint. This divorce commands attention because, while a family matter on the surface, SK Group, South Korea's second-largest conglomerate, significantly impacts national GDP. Even minor shifts in its power structure could disrupt capital markets, supply chains, and economic stability. Throughout 2020, Korean courts urged Roe and Choi to pursue mediation. But with the divorce a national sensation, could a quiet resolution still be possible? Roe So-young stood firm on her demands, while Choi Tae-won insisted that SK Group shares could not be divided, offering only a cash settlement far below her expectations. The legal battle dragged on for years, with no clear resolution. This grueling war of attrition persisted until August 18, 2023, when the court finally issued a preliminary ruling. The court officially granted the divorce between Roe So-young and Choi Tae-won. More significantly, it declared Choi primarily at fault for destroying the marriage, citing his years of infidelity and the physical and emotional suffering inflicted on his wife. While Roe won the moral victory in determining who was responsible for the marriage's collapse, her triumph in asset division was less absolute. The court rejected her claim to SK Group shares, reasoning that they constituted a special inheritance of the Choi family, not marital property subject to equal division, but a legacy tied to their lineage. Despite Roe's tireless efforts in raising their children, maintaining the household, and nurturing social connections, the court noted she had no direct role in SK Group's operational decisions. Contributions and share ownership, it ruled, were distinct matters. Furthermore, the court emphasized that dividing SK shares would alter the conglomerate's power structure, impacting not just the Choi family, but also the stability of South Korea's economy. Thus, the shares remained intact, but Roe was awarded a cash settlement, $51.15 million for asset compensation, and $76,923 for emotional damages. In essence, she could not claim the shares, but would leave with a substantial sum and her dignity intact. Neither party was satisfied. Roe felt the ruling was unjust, while Choi deemed the compensation excessive, arguing it would strain his ability to support Kim Hee-young and their daughter. His legal team called the decision unreasonable and biased. In 2024, after paying $3.31 million in legal fees, both Roe and Choi faced off again in a new round of litigation. This time, Roe made concessions, dropping her demand for SK shares, but revising her cash compensation request. She raised her claim from $1 billion to $1.54 billion, and increased the emotional damages demand to $2.31 million. These staggering figures escalated the asset battle into an ever more harrowing saga. Some lawyers questioned whether the court's conflation of Choi's infidelity with Roe's lack of involvement in SK's operations skewed fundamental principles in family law. They argued that divorce and asset division are separate issues. Why should her non-involvement in corporate management diminish her entitlement? Public sentiment, however, rallied behind Roe. Since the divorce became public in 2015, she had endured a decade-long struggle. Her resilience earned widespread respect and admiration across South Korea. No longer the submissive wife or a sidelined figure, Roe So-young emerged as a symbol of tenacity and courage, dubbed the Lone Lioness. The term lone isn't entirely accurate, as her 3 children stood steadfastly by her side. Throughout the ordeal, they offered not only emotional support, but also decisive action. Each child submitted letters to the appellate court, expressing unwavering support for their mother, urging her to fight on fearlessly and demanding fair compensation. On May 30, 2024, the court issued its second preliminary ruling. It ordered Choi Tae-won to pay Roe So-young $1.06 billion in assets and $2 million for emotional damages. The divorce saga finally drew to a close. Facing the media after the verdict, Roe could not conceal her emotions. 30 years of marriage ended like this, she said. It's truly heartbreaking that our family and private matters have caused such public concern. I feel deep regret and shame. I always believed a family is not a contract, but a covenant. And honoring that covenant is what sets humans apart from animals. She did not shy away from addressing Kim Hee-young, the woman who shattered her family, declaring, "Those who destroy others' families must face responsibility and consequences." This became South Korea's costliest divorce in history. As the final ruling landed, society reeled. Under the glare of reporters' flashes, in the solemn air of the courtroom, and before the watchful eyes of the public, the marriage of Roh So-young and Chai Tae-won officially ended. Kim Hee-young, immediately after the verdict, transferred funds to Roh and retreated to a quiet life, avoiding the spotlight. Over time, she appeared unaffected, her Instagram post revealing a serene existence, seemingly moving past the turmoil to embrace a happy new chapter. By 2025, the latest reports indicated that Kim Hee-young and her daughter, with Chai Tae-won, had settled into adulthood. Kim adopted a boy with Birdman syndrome, reportedly to model positive values for her daughter through charity. Her son with Chai recently changed his surname to Chai, becoming Chai Tae-won's second son. The saga of the mistress continued to spark debate. Once, figures like Kim faced harsh criticism from Korean netizens when caught or posting on Instagram. Now, her mistress dreams had materialized, posing by luxury cars, mingling at elite galas. Some even mocked her as the SK lady, suggesting her ambitions had come true in the chaebol world. Post-divorce, Roh So-young's life transformed dramatically. She re-emerged with a bold new image, swiftly reclaiming public attention. Her children thrived in their careers. On October 13, 2024, her second daughter, Chai Min-young, married a Chinese-American military officer in a ceremony attended by South Korea's chaebol and political elite. The eldest daughter now serves as deputy director of SK's biotech division, while the youngest son has risen to a managerial role at SK's U.S. branch. One could argue that Roh So-young shines brighter post-divorce than she ever did in her husband's shadow. No longer Chai Tae-won's wife, she has courageously stepped forward, crafting a new narrative unbound by the ghosts of her past. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.